All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. While our same two players are still with us tonight, we have large Hurricane Larry still lumbering about the central Atlantic basin. This is going to move up near Bermuda, now confidently expected to turn east of Bermuda and then move up towards Newfoundland as it becomes an extra tropical cyclone this weekend. And we're also tracking this big mess in the Gulf of Mexico, better known as Invest 91L. Still some chance of tropical development in the period before it makes landfall over Florida tomorrow night and Thursday morning. So we could solve a short-lived tropical cyclone out of this. We're not expecting a whole lot out of it. So we'll talk about these two, and then we'll jump across to the Pacific Basin for a quick look at all the nonsense over there. So Larry, nothing major with his forecast tonight. National Hurricane Center still has this as a major hurricane tonight. Maximum sustained winds 115 miles an hour, but it's back to the other end of Category 3, where it's been in that same category for several days. Movements in the northwest at 9 miles an hour. That will become more of a northeast track by Thursday afternoon. Tropical storm watches are up for Bermuda, so we are expecting at least some impacts. Larry is going to pass probably about 100 to 150 miles at least off to the east now, so we're not expecting major impacts, but it's a really big storm. I mean, this thing's pretty good size. You can see the size comparison. There's a little tiny Bermuda right there, in the corner of your screen, and then there's big old Larry coming across. So even if the storm passes something about, that's about how the track looks, in comparison. So there's some question as to how much they'll get, but definitely looks like tropical storm impacts. Not expecting any hurricane impacts. And overall, track guidance is so high, it's definitely going to pass off to the east. And the only question now is how close, or when this comes directly over parts of Newfoundland, that southeast, part of the island could or definitely get some unfavorable conditions. GFS Euro, that's not anyone else. So GFS Euro are kind of showing the same thing as the hurricane models are, that it'll pass. Either something like this could put some folks right here on the edge of the map in some bad times, because if you get it to pass more on the north side here of this track cluster, then you have the winds moving along with the storm, which will be rapidly. Notice how fast the storm begins to accelerate. This is 3 days and this is 4 days, so it's covering all this terrain in just 24 hours. So you're definitely having a storm moving probably 25, 30 miles an hour, and then you can get some nasty winds when the storms do that. So a pretty good extra tropical storm coming for Newfoundland, but overall, nothing they haven't seen before. Most likely just gonna have to be something they'll keep an eye on. But overall, Larry, no impact to the eastern U.S. Just going to see some high swells and rip currents as waves from Larry push to the coast and help churn up the seas and get all those rip currents, which those can be deadly on their own. And definitely, if you're going to the beach this weekend in the eastern U.S., please pay close attention to that, because it is definitely nothing to mess around with, and those things can catch you at a moment's notice. And they don't get nearly the fanfare that big winds and big rain and all that do. So, be safe out there. The beach can be unforgiving sometimes. All right, speaking of unfavorable beach conditions, we have Invest 91L here in the Gulf of Mexico, up to a 50% chance of development tonight. Hurricane Center's changed their language a little bit, and now noting that there at least is a chance a tropical system could form before landfall. And again, what we're talking about is an organized area of low pressure that is sufficient enough with tropical characteristics to get a name. It doesn't always necessarily radically change what the expectations are. This is a long satellite loop of 91L throughout the day today. And excuse me, the system started off a little bit, ragged this morning, but then it picked it up throughout the day and actually became pretty impressive for a couple hours. There's a lot of convection ongoing with this, but there's still a lot of wind shear over the storm. There's still an upper trough over the region, which is shearing a lot of these storms off to the north and to the east. And there's also some drier air as a whole. You can see a lot of breaks. There's a lot of dry air, especially on the west side of the Gulf today. And so that deep tropical flow, you kind of have a more northeast flow off into the Gulf, and you got the situation where there's some dry air getting in there, and you can see as the evening went on, the afternoon went on, the convection collapsed. So we'll see if this refires tonight. There's a few pockets trying to refire, but again, it's much more scattered than it was earlier. You saw those reds and blacks, how much more there were earlier today, and how much more uniform it was, and then it just kind of fell apart. Now you've got a much more ragged look to it. So those pulses of convection, the more they do that, the more moist the atmosphere will get, and the more likely you'll have thunderstorms organizing, and the longer they persist, the more the pressure lowers. That's kind of how this all gets started. It's also going to be helped by the fact you have a cold front approaching. This is upper level water vapor, and you can see the string of thunderstorms tonight moving in through parts of the Midwest and the southern plains, and the general trough, with the winds moving like this in this region. This front is sinking southward, and this is what's coming to pick up Larry. not Larry. Well, it's picking up Larry too, the larger trough is, but this front specifically is picking up 91L, and it's going to take this big mass and begin to move it along the front, and that's over Florida and Georgia, and then eventually out to sea. So really, the question is, can something form in this time frame before it actually makes landfall? You're gonna have some forcing. These fronts will generally try to force low pressure to form sometimes, so you'll have that. The GFS and Euro are still both forecasting something. The GFS is a little bit faster. It has a more organized vortex by tomorrow morning, which is unlikely at this point, but by tomorrow evening it has at least a somewhat organized, albeit pretty weak low, moving into western Florida, kind of closer to like Mexico Beach and Panama City and whatnot. The European model is a little further down to the south, or to the east rather, and it has a vortex formed up something by Thursday morning, and it's a little bit more towards the Big Bend. So the GFS is more like this, European's more like this, but generally shows low pressure moving into western Florida. And it seems like it's at least somewhat organized. It would be kind of on the cusp of tropical depression or tropical storm status. The ensemble members, at least for the European, do mostly show the light blue lines indicate tropical depression or weaker, and the dark blue lines indicate, that cusp of tropical depression, tropical storm. And there's a handful of tropical storm type models mixed in there, and again, we're talking pretty weak. We're talking 35 40-mile-an-hour winds at most. I mean, 40-mile-an-hour may be the ceiling for something like this, so I don't want people to think it's going to be anything too serious. But a lot of heavy rain and some gusty winds are definitely coming for this region, southeast Georgia, northern Florida, regardless if this forms or not. Even if this comes across like this, you're still talking about something that's going to have some stronger upper level winds. It's going to fuel a lot of thunderstorms, especially Wednesday night through at least Thursday afternoon. A solid 24 to 30 hour period of these pulses of heavy rainfall. GFS mid-level moisture chart shows this pretty well. You can see here a lot of deep tropical flow out of the southwest coming across the state, and by Wednesday afternoon you've already got really deep tropical moisture entrenched across southeast Georgia, northern Florida, and even probably into the Carolinas to a degree. Again, as this front is kind of about here in this model, and this front's really kind of forcing all this to happen out ahead of the front. And then you have the weak low moving along the front. This moves through Thursday, and then drier air starts to invade most of this region by Friday, where some of the moisture still lingers over Florida towards the weekend. But overall, some heavy rain, gusty winds, some scattered embedded thunderstorms. Some of those could be severe localized flooding, and some coastal water rises are possible. And, if you get a tropical storm watch or a warning at the last minute, it wouldn't be super surprising, but I wouldn't be running for the hills. It's just going to be a nasty, about 30 to 48 hour period either way. So just be keeping an eye on it. Nothing life altering, but something to watch in the next couple days. All right, we're going to go ahead and finish up here with the Western Pacific, where this has roared back to life. We have two tropical systems. We have Tropical Storm Consone, however you want to say that, over the Philippines. The system kind of doing its thing today and is moving slow right now. Should pick up towards the end of the week, though. And a decently strong tropical storm, or possibly a typhoon, probably going to landfall somewhere in Vietnam towards the weekend. Kind of churning over the Philippines tonight. Whole lot of rain. Definitely localized flooding, or probably widespread flooding going on in some locations. Definitely not a great time, as you never want to see a tropical system just kind of sit over you for extended periods of time. That's always a recipe for bad news. But not to be outdone is its friend next to it, which is Typhoon Shantu. Wow, this thing exploded. So this is Shantu, and 1 minute visible imagery shows a ridiculously powerful, small, not a very big one, little pinhole eye, just a tiny, ferocious typhoon. This system intensified like 70 knots. I mean, this has only been like 100-mile-an-hour pressure difference, because yesterday when we talked about this, it was a tropical storm. Tonight, it's near a super typhoon. This went from basically a tropical storm to a Category 4 in less than 24 hours. This is Colorado State's multi-platform analysis, and this shows that the pressure may already be down close to 900 millibars. If it's not, it's probably in the 920s or 9-teens at this point, and it was in the 980s this morning. So it went from in the mid to low 980s all the way down to about a little bit just north of 900 within the last about 12 to 18 hours. It's been an unbelievably impressive intensification for the small storm, and not done. Typhoon Warning Center expects this to get up to 135 knots, which is 155 miles an hour, the top end of Category 4, and Obviously, it could go to Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and would also be a super typhoon by Westpac standards, which I believe would be the first since like April in this basin, which is almost unheard of. This has been one of the quietest seasons on record in the Western Pacific, which can crank out a super typhoon almost any month of the year, and definitely been a quiet year out here, and this thing is definitely going to change the script on that a little bit. Expected to mostly hold that intensity, strong Category 4, even Category 5, all the way up through potential landfall in southern Taiwan, or maybe even the northern Philippines. I have to watch it too. It looks like southern Taiwan to be closer. May also just shoot the gap, go between the two big islands, and then move into China, where it looks like it should be weakening on approach. Hopefully some cooler water and slightly more unfavorable conditions. But right now, this thing is in prime conditions and is definitely blowing up. Unbelievable intensification, probably near record, maybe not record out here because you can get some unbelievably fast intensifying storms. But the one bad news for this region is this water really hasn't been tapped in a long time. It's been months as water's been able to just sit and warm up. So no surprise that the system is definitely doing some stuff and is definitely small but impressive. This will grow in size as it approaches over the next couple of days. Probably get a couple eyewall replacement cycles out of this. Could be a pretty big typhoon on approach. We'll see how it plays out. That's what I got for you guys tonight, your tropical update. So Larry's going to move away. Some minor impacts to Bermuda, some more serious impacts to Newfoundland possibly as it becomes an extratropical storm. 91L could briefly spin up as a named storm just before Florida, but mostly just going to be a lot of heavy rain and thunderstorms, regardless if it forms up or not, with some breezy winds. Not much else in the pipeline across the Atlantic. We're still watching some of these waves coming off of Africa, but it's going to be a little while before they get across, and it's kind of debatable if they're going to recurve or not. And then we also are going to watch like the Western Caribbean, Southern Gulf of Mexico for this time period in about 7 days. We could have something trying to form up over here, but models have kind of backed off on it some, especially the GFS, and it looks like the forcing maybe more of Central America and the Eastern Pacific. So either you have something forming up over here, just kind of be a big mess over land, or you could have something trying to form on this side. All just kind of depends. Something worth watching, but again, no immediate threats as the Atlantic Basin overall for the peak of the season is actually looking pretty okay for right now, and it might stay that way for a little while longer. So let's hope so. But no imminent dire threats in the pipeline right now, which is good news. So we got for you guys tonight, your tropical update. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.